sound speeds. And if you record audio at home, something like a podcast, and you probably run into devices like these before: the SE Electronics Dynamite DM1, the red one, or the Triton Audio Fethead, which is the gray one. And you might have wondered if they're necessary. Now, I'm not going to be addressing that question in this video, and I even have a video where I discuss whether or not it's necessary and even test it if you have clean preamps. But I'm not going to be discussing that in this video. What I am going to be doing is answering yet another question that people who buy these devices often have. Are they necessary to plug into the end of your microphone, which makes it kind of awkward? Like, I can't even plug this in with this particular stand, and it also makes it ugly, and my cable won't even go out properly off the bottom. Or is it okay if you put it at the end of the cable run, right going into your interface mixer recorder? Is there a right? Is there a wrong? In this video, we're going to test just that. A few years ago, Bandrew over at Podcastage wrote an article about this very topic, and he posted it along with the high-quality audio comparisons at podcastage.com for people to read. Now, if you're not aware, podcastage.com is a great resource for all kinds of audio comparisons and things that he has not produced videos about, including this particular topic. So in this video, I'm going to be putting to video this test and comparison, but my own way. As I mentioned in the intro, I'm going to be using the SE Electronics Dynamite DM1, which adds 28 decibels of gain, and the Triton Audio Fethead, which adds 22 decibels of gain. Now, the reason I'm using these is because you can plug either one of these devices directly into a microphone or an interface without any additional cables, unlike the Cloudlifter CL-1, which requires one cable to go into and one cable to go out of. So we're simplifying signal flow by using these and one cable as opposed to this and two cables. In addition to the Fethead and DM1, we're going to be using a 150 ohm XLR dummy. This is invaluable when you're testing low noise floors like the EIN in your system. And so this is going to be highly valuable to this test as well. So microphone activator and 150 ohm dummy XLR. But what about the cable? You may say, well, that's mindless. Use a Mogami Gold. Well, what if you happen to personally make and endorse and stand by in every single way cables that you believe are better in EMI and RFI performance and in overall quality than a Mogami Gold? Hey, that brings us to the SoundSpeed Special cable, which is what I'm going to be using in this video. So now you know my entire signal flow, and if you don't watch this channel all the time, you know that I always record on a Sound Devices MixPre 6, which I personally measured to have an EIN below negative 130 decibels. Extremely clean, extremely low noise preamps. Now, coming out of that, we have a SoundSpeed Special cable, which I stand by as being the best around, EMI and RFI resilient and lowest possible noise transmission, and a 150 ohm dummy resistor XLR, which I personally made. So the only thing left is the two microphone activators that we're testing. Microphone activators such as these will receive 48 volts phantom power from an interface mixer or recorder that it's connected to, and it will use that 48 volts phantom power to create gain for a dynamic or ribbon microphone, which is a low sensitivity microphone. And best of all, none of these devices pass on phantom power through, which could damage those microphones. The DM1 and the Fethead are going to be compared at two different gain levels, plus 50 dB of gain and plus 60 dB of gain. The reason being is that most dynamic and ribbon microphones will require an amount of gain fitting between that level. Plus 10 dB is a pretty good even number. So we might as well go with that. The thing to keep in mind about decibels is that it is logarithmic, meaning that it increases in size exponentially the more you go. So the difference between negative 70 and negative 60 dB might be that amount, and negative 60 and negative 50 dB might be that amount. Negative 50 to negative 40 might be that amount, and by the time you go from negative 10 to 0 dB, it's going to be bigger than I can display on the screen. I'm going to make a prediction here, and I think that if you plug the microphone activator directly to the microphone, you're going to have a lower noise floor going into your interface than you would if you plug the microphone activator directly into your interface mixer or recorder. The reason being is that if you were to amplify a signal coming directly out of the microphone and then it goes to the cable line, you're not going to be picking up any kind of RFI, EMI, or any kind of interference along the way going up to the interface mixer recorder. Now, if it comes out of the microphone, goes through a very clean cable, and then goes into the signal booster, you might have a very low noise floor too, but I don't think it's going to be better than it would be if you were to increase the signal strength coming out of the microphone itself. Think about an amplifier going to your speakers. If you amplify that signal up to 200 watts, for example, then you go into your speaker, you don't have to use a shielded cable, because at that point, very few things are going to create buzz and interference in your line, providing you're using a good quality gauge cable. But those speaker cables are not shielded. So in the same kind of likeness, I think that if you amplify a stronger signal and send it out, you're going to be running into less things that are going to be amplified interference-wise by the time you go into your interface mixer or recorder. Of course, we are going to be using a SoundSpeed's XLR cable in this video, so our results might not show that much of a difference in comparison. However, if you don't use a very premium cable going from your mixer to your microphone, your results, let's just say, may vary. The Sound Devices Mix Pre 6 is supplying 48 volts phantom power and the amount of gain to each device you see on the screen, totaling 50 decibels on the left and 60 decibels on the right. So what I'm doing now is removing the microphone activator, plugging in the 150 ohm connector directly to the cable, and then going out of the recorder, I'm adding the microphone activator right there, and then continuing to record another test. I recorded 30 seconds before I made this exchange, and I'm recording 30 seconds after I did this exchange. So now we can go into post and see exactly what it's doing. So I have all 4 of our audio tracks, and we're opening them up into Reaper, and we're going to do separate tracks. That way we can see each line the way it was intended. Okay, so I'm going to select the very first track here, and we're going to label it first. So I'm going to hit play and see what it is. I remember it was a Fethead, and I believe it was a 28 dB.
All right, we're first up with the Fethead. The Mix Pre 6 gain is set to 28 dB.
And I sound entertained. Okay, so
right,
next one.
Still the Fethead. This is 38 dB of gain.
38 dB of gain, okay.
Same exact
and then
thing.
the next one should be the Dynamite DM1.
Okay, DM1 now, 22 dB
22
of gain.
dB of gain.
So,
and then the final one should be the DM1 with 32 dB.
This is the SM7B going in there. Now it's still the Dynamite DM1, but 32 dB.
Very good. All right, so basically the idea here is that if you have the Fethead adding 22 decibels of gain, then you can add that to 28 and get 50 and add it to 38 to get 60. And the same kind of thing holds true with the DM1. If you add 28 dB of gain, you get 50 out of this one, and you add 28 dB of gain, you get 60 out of this. When you're looking at decibels, the lower it is, the more noise there is going to be, because your noise floor is going to maintain the same level. But if you only gain up a little bit, your signal is very, very low, and your noise level is never going to drop down below what its technical standard should be or technical specification should be. So the noise level's here, your gain's only here. That's not a very big difference. But if you raise them up, the gain will increase quicker than the noise floor will because of the nature of logarithmic audio. So your signal will increase and it start to spread out more from your noise floor. And when that happens, you're going to have a better signal to noise ratio. So the higher you take your gain, the lower the noise will be away from your signal. So that said, that's why I'm doing a test at both 50 dB and at 60 dB optimal, gain levels, because I want to see if there's a difference. And technically speaking, the performance should be better on the 60 dB version than the 50 dB. Even though you're adding 10 dB more of gain. Now, we're going to go ahead and actually test this to verify that theory, but I'm going to in order to do that, I'm going to line up when I plugged back in each one of the devices. So right over here, you're going to see that the pop right there indicates that I was plugging back in the cable with the DM1 or the Fethead on it back into the Mix Pre 6. So I'm going to go ahead and select all of them. And we're going to section that little part out here. I'm going to go over here, select them all again. And since that pop indicates the start of it, we're going to select all this extra filler stuff off of the end, and we're going to knock it out of the park. So those are now all gone. So I'm going to select this and this and this and line it all up. So now what we have is our audio is basically the quiet area at the very beginning, which is indicated right here as to when I go out of the EIN measurement tool, which is the 150 ohm. I'll get my words right, I promise. 150 ohm dummy load. Then it goes out of that directly into the cable, then to the Mix Pre 6. Now on this side, that's where we go out of the dummy load into the cable and goes through the cable to the DM1 or the Fethead into the recorder. So if there's a difference between them, then you know that will determine which one is actually has a better signal to it. So what we're going to start with right now is looking at each one of these JS audio statistics, which is a tool you can use inside of Reaper to measure things like noise floor. So I'm going to go ahead and open up JS audio statistics, and you have to click that little button right there, otherwise it doesn't turn on. And then we're going to close each one of these, and I'm going to line them all up so that way we can see all of these levels as we are intended. Okay, so there we go with the third one, JS Audio Statistics. I promise I do know this program. And actually, why didn't you separate? Okay, so let's separate these things a little bit. There we go. Okay, and you can see on the very, very top here where it says JS Audio Statistics, and it says the track name, DM122. So you can tell that when you use JS Audio Statistics right here, and I didn't actually tick that button, so we're going to go there, and now we have all of our JS Audio Statistics side by side. So let's line it up. Okay, so now all of these are turned on, and I'm going to hit play here. Now the thing that you're going to be looking for, all of them are moving, which means they're all enabled, which is that little tick box up at the very, very top. So we're just listening to the noise floor. And this is all coming straight out of the dummy load into the microphone activator, the amplifier. Then it goes through the cable into the recorder. So when you look at the peak and RMS loudness right there, the one, it doesn't really matter which one you look at for this particular test, but as long as you look at 28 here and 22 there, because that's when we're adding it up to 50 dB. So comparing those numbers here, negative 85.82 is more or less the same as negative 85.1. So we're getting a little bit lower of a noise floor from the Fethead than we are the DM1. And you can even see that in the RMS noise, the total noise loudness also. And then when you look at the 60 dB version here, you're looking also here at the Fethead, and it's negative 75.68 versus negative 75.04. So you're getting better performance also out of the Fethead over the DM1. Now, if you compare the two of them together, Fethead versus Fethead, and we're going to be looking at that adding 28 dB, this is less gain applied from the mix pre-6, and this is more gain applied from the mix pre-6. So technically speaking, if our theory of lower noise floor does indeed stick with the increased signal, then this level here should have a higher noise floor than this one right here. But wait a minute, look at this. It's holding relatively true, but then you got to keep in mind, they shouldn't be 10 dB off, but then you have to basically add 10 dB onto this. So if you add 10 dB to this number here, you're going to turn this magically into negative 75.82 versus negative 75.68. So right here, it looks like on the mix pre-6, it almost looks like when you add a little bit less gain, it looks like it's cleaner here on the mix pre-6. Is that right? Adding 30 dB of gain plus a Fethead, yeah, that's more, and 28. Okay, that's a little bit surprising. I would have expected the number to be lower with the higher signal to noise ratio. Stop right there for a moment, because this is Alan in post-production, providing you some insight as to what I should have been thinking instead. I wasn't thinking of peak left and right values correctly. What I should have done is subtracted 50 from the values on the left or 60 from the values on the right. And doing so would give me a value around negative 135 dB, which should be compared to the EIN value. Now, it's 5 dB lower than the EIN, which doesn't make any sense, but part of that is in the conversion loss between analog audio and digital audio, and I talk about that in my measuring EIN video. Now, what I was doing in this particular case is looking at it as if it was a recording level, and that's the noise floor of an audio recording. But this isn't a microphone we're talking about. This was a 150 ohm XLR dummy. If it was a microphone, it would have a constant output, and you would have to compensate for that output with your gain. So there you go. If you look at these numbers right here, compare that now, negative 85, negative 75, negative 85, negative 75. Okay, now we're going to select an area here at the back part of it once we went to the end of the cable run and plugged it directly into the recorder. So now what's happening is instead of the very, very quiet signal from the 150 ohm dummy load going into the inline amplifier and amplifying, then going through the entire cable run into the recorder, that has to add less gain. Now it's the opposite. Now we're actually going to start with the dummy load. It's going to travel through the cable, and then it's going to get amplified. Since I just reset all of these, let's hit play and see what happens. Playing this, well, that just destroys my theory altogether. Because if you look over here at the Fethead, the noise floor is actually lower than it was at the beginning when I amplified it first and then sent it down the line. But on the DM1, the noise floor is higher. So wow, that's an interesting test result. Because I'm trying to rationalize it. It makes sense that if there's any kind of little minute signal in an analog audio line, it's going to be amplified. But it's the same exact cable, same exact everything. The only difference is the thing you plug into the front of it. So there's some food for thought for you. The test results are lower on the Fethead if you put it directly into your recorder and you're using a premium cable, versus on the DM1, your noise floor is higher if you amplify it at the end of the cable. So there you have it. Results inconclusive. And I guess this is because I have a very clean recorder, a very clean cable, and a very clean 150 ohm dummy XLR. But the only thing that's really changing is the DM1 versus the Fethead. And each one of them performs slightly different, with an increased noise floor on one of them and a lower noise floor on the other. So what I would say is, and this is my advice, if you are not using the very cleanest and best possible components in your signal chain, then you might want to run a test for yourself and maybe duplicate this exact same comparison that I just did. Do a couple of different gain levels and see what comes of it. So thank you for tuning into this episode of Soundspeeds. Be sure to tune in the future for more test comparisons, confused Allen face, and of course, sound advice. Have a question you'd like answered or want to add something? Be sure to write it in the comment section down below. You can also make a suggestion for future topics of discussion. Again, comment section down below, or you can email me at soundspeeds@yahoo.com. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss out on future sound advice.